I got to tell you, I honestly can't believe this is the first time we're meeting and chatting because we've both been in the scene for so long. But Subfocus, welcome to America's Dance 30 for the first time.
Thank you for having me on the show, man.
I know you are insane right now, so I can't thank you enough for the time. Back in the day, what got me into drum and bass was Aphrodite's Woman That Rolls. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that classic.
Yes, I know. Yeah, like Aphrodite made some amazing drum and bass. I mean, he's still making music, but like some of those early records of his really caught my ear as well. There was one called Dub Moods that I was like obsessed with when I was younger. Man. I mean, that's the sort of same kind of era that I really got into it. So it was people like him, Ronnie Size, Adam F, like kind of late 90s stuff.
Well, with the genre being pretty much underground for so long, as a mainly drum and bass artist, with it finally cracking through mainstream dance, are you just like, what the F took you guys so long?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe when I was getting into it, some of what attracted me to it was the fact that it was like this underground subculture, It was kind of like this thing, like if you're into, it's like a secret club that, you sort of like excited if you meet somebody else who's into it too, because it's kind of like unusual, I would say that it's been growing steadily, since that time, and it's had some mainstream moments in the UK in the last, since like the early 2010s, I would say. There were songs like drum and bass songs getting into the charts. I mean, even in the early noughties, there were songs kind of breaking through. So it's also, but I think it's definitely America that's taken a while to kind of get into drum and bass, and it's just like now that it's really starting to break through, and it's really exciting to be a part of that, and see it reach, because I just want to sort of spread the word of this genre that I love. And yeah, it's a little bit, it's not the most commercial sounding genre, and it's like crazy fast and all these things that make it a bit harder for people to understand, I think, but people are really getting into it in the States now, and I'm loving to see that.
Absolutely. And even within drum and bass, there are, so many different subgenres or slower, more heavenly tempo, like Jess Glynn, a friend of mine, was more, down tempo-ish drum and bass. So I totally get it. But congratulations on Push the Tempo with Katy B going #1.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. I'm so stoked about this. Like I wouldn't have expected that at all. It's like I think it wasn't like a record I was necessarily thinking would work in the States all that well, because it's more of a kind of UK record in a way. But I think some of those type of drum and bass tracks, I think, is that sort of UK flavour has sort of been resonating with people in the States. Tracks like Badadan, Chasing Status, feel like have really had some cut through. So
yeah, it's so good to see. Now, I know you had a #1 on the UK charts, but is this your first #1 on the US dance charts?
Yeah, for sure it is. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely, man.
If I would have known that, I totally would have brought a bottle of Mo or something to pop open here. Congratulations.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, I can't wait to talk about how this song was born, especially since when I was researching it, I saw who helped in the production, which was incredible, but we'll talk about that coming up. But first, since this is your first time on America's Dance 30, let's get to know Subfocus a little better with Finky's Firsts.
Okay.
So I always love finding out the origin story of artists. When I was researching, I saw that you've been pretty much in music forever. I mean, you started a band when you were younger. You got into music production as a teenager. But when you were growing up, was music the first thing you wanted to get into, or was there something else you wanted to do when you grew up?
I mean, not at all to start with. Like, when I was about like 12, 13, or like maybe 11, I suddenly got really into music like overnight. I'd not really like been that excited by it up until that moment, and I sort of found like bands like Nirvana, and I was suddenly like obsessed. And me and my friends started this band basically before we could play any instruments at all. So I like started playing the bass. I took up the bass because I thought it'd be kind of easy to play. And I think like um, very quickly I wanted to get more involved in actually writing the music, and that's what and I was kind of like nerdy at the time, and that's kind of where what led me in the direction that I went. But then I found quickly found kind of a lot of UK dance acts were channeling rock music at the time. So there was acts like The Prodigy and Chemical Brothers, and they were sort of fusing dance and rock, and that really got me hooked on dance. And then I've just like been obsessive about that ever since, really. But I mean, late '90s in the UK, drum and bass was very like it was like this new exciting type of music, and I got just hooked on that in the mid '90s when I was really young, and just sort of went from there really.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned Prodigy and Chemical Brothers because that was such a great era of music. Now, when you were trying to decide on an artist project name, was Sub Focus your first choice, or were there other names you were considering?
Yeah, it pretty much was. I was like, it doesn't really like. I was sitting with my friend Sam, and we were basically just sticking words together. And I was like looking around the studio, and there's like typically, the word sub is written on a lot of synths. It's kind of like, the lowest bass. I think I didn't really want it to mean anything. I just wanted it to sort of be something that sounded like interesting to say, or, to roll off the tongue, and be like a new word. I didn't really want it to like have connotations of anything else, really.
Well, you did a good job. I mean, it's an epic name, so congratulations on that. Now, do you remember the first time performing for a crowd?
Yeah, I mean, I used to. My friend ran like a student night in Guildford, and which is like close to London. I used to live in London, so I used to come down and play his student night when I was he was a couple of years older than me, so he was already at college, and I was able to like come down and play. I was sort of like I'd been DJing for a bit longer than him, so I was sort of able to come down and play and fill in at his night. And I kind of like, so I had a lot of time like just learning the ropes of DJing before I had any music out or anything. But I used to like test my new songs and stuff. Um, I found when I actually had the as Sub Focus was much more nerve-wracking though. Like I remember doing a show in Portugal and just being like incredibly nervous. Very eccentric promoter called Marco looking after me, and I was just like, "Wow, this is great." I was like, I don't know if I could do this every week, because it was when the nerves just like really get on top of you. But I quickly, luckily, got used to the feeling of playing and started to really love it.
I'm so glad you stuck with it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think it just, it took, I think it probably happens to everyone, it takes you a while to adjust to that level of like performance in different ways.
Now, when you first got into playing, when you first got on the decks, did you go right into drum and bass? Because it is such a fast genre to get into.
Yeah, a friend of mine had some decks, and I was like playing around with them, but I bought some off this guy who was like a mobile DJ, like a kind of wedding DJ guy, and they were like belt drive decks, so they basically have like an elastic band inside them that runs them, super like kind of weak like torque, there's no kind of power there really. But it was well, I remember when I got them I could kind of immediately grasp how to mix. I even remember doing some crazy thing where I'm really showing my age by talking about all these technologies, but like my mum had these two CD players, and I figured out that like some of the drum and bass songs that I had on CD were like exactly the same BPM. So I figured out by just playing them from two separate CD players at the same time, you could kind of mix between them. But yeah, so I think I took to DJing quite naturally. Like it kind of made a lot of sense to me immediately. And I think I was always like pretty obsessed with like rhythm and stuff when I was a kid, and it really like scratched that itch sort of thing.
Well, you're talking about dating yourself with that stuff. I mean, I remember hearing songs on the radio and recording on cassette and then pausing the cassette to mix it with another song as that song came in and unpausing the cassette. We don't need to talk about that. but speaking of radio,
yeah.
you've had some incredible smashes, including your latest number one, Push the Tempo. Do you remember the first time hearing one of your songs on the radio?
Oh man, I don't remember exactly the first time, but I think like an early supporter of mine was probably Zane Lowe, who was on Radio 1 at the time and now on Beats. But he used to, it was probably him or maybe Annie Mac in the UK, either of those people on Radio 1 who were like early supporters. But yeah, I mean, I can't remember the very, very first time. But it was, yeah, it's always really exciting to hear your song on the radio, you know?
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Prodigy and the Chemical Brothers. Do you remember the first song that made you fall in love with dance music?
I mean, I remember the first, like, jungle drum and bass song I heard was, like, in my class at school, someone put on Incredible by M-Beat featuring General Levy, which is like... it's like a kind of ragga jungle classic, basically, from the mid-90s. And that was the first time I'd ever heard drum and bass or jungle. And it just sounded like completely weird to me, like this completely new. And I was immediately like incredibly excited by it, you know, and I think I've been hooked ever since.
Well, finally, in honor of Push the Tempo going number one, you know, drum and bass is such a fast tempo. What's the first thing you do to push the tempo? What's your first thing to get an adrenaline rush?
Well, I mean, I always find that like performing just kind of completely like invigorates you, you know, like when you're on the road, sometimes you're like insanely tired. You've been like, you know, flying to America and you have a show the same night or something. But like performing just completely blows all the cobwebs away and you're just like right there.
Yeah, and it's such an incredible feeling standing on stage in front of tens of thousands of people that are just vibing with you. Let's talk about this smash. How was Push the Tempo born?
Yeah, so I'd wanted to work with Katy B for a long time. She's, you know, a real like legend, especially in the UK, I think. She sung on like a lot of a couple of like early dubstep classics. So Katie on Emissions, her really big song with Screaming Benga, and that's just like an all-time classic in the UK. So yeah, when we got the opportunity to work together, I was really excited, and we kind of like got inspired by that song a little bit in and the sort of sounds that she was using. It's kind of got these sort of electro-y stab sounds that you hear like coming back a lot now, and we decided to sort of lean into that sound a little bit and sort of she's like, I love her stuff because she's kind of like a lot of the stuff she sings about is basically like about being in clubs or like in the sort of nightlife, you know. It's not like her lyrics aren't really relationshipy, they're more about just like going out and losing yourself in the music, which I think is, love that. Like if you can do that well, that's super cool, I think.
Yeah, I saw that you guys had, you know, crossed paths many times before. Why did it take so long for you guys to finally collab?
Yeah, so we've got the same PT, personal trainer. So we like had met each other loads and loads of times, and we're both good friends with Screaming Benga as well. So yeah, I don't know what took us so long, but it's like it's one of those things, you know. Sometimes there's like, yeah, people that you sort of mean to work with for years, and it just never happens until one day. But yeah, we love working together, and we've been like performing the song a few times in the UK and in different places. She's a real sweetheart. It's been really nice working with her.
Yeah, you guys both did an incredible job on it. Now, how did Punctual get into it? Is there anything that those guys can't do?
Yeah, those guys are great, man. I mean, we've been doing a few things together in the studio, and and this was one of them. I think because like I work on my own a lot, or like I have done in the past. I've sort of trying to do more collabs these days. It really inspires you when when you sort of like have good chemistry with someone in the studio. Like, obviously, worked with John Summit last year, and just I'm just trying to collaborate to you kind of it kind of helps you sort of like grow as an artist and learn new things and just also like it can add a little bit more fun to the process, when you're like just vibing with other people in the room. So I'm trying to do that more now. Like for the first 10 years or so of me making music, I was kind of like pretty much only on my own, and now I'm like I try to collaborate quite a bit. Obviously me and Dimension have done a lot of songs together as well in the last few years.
And is it tough to start working with other people when you're so used to just being by yourself?
I think it's hard to like concede creative control, but normally I'm lucky to be in the position that I can drive that a bit. If it's your record, you can kind of have final say. But yeah, it's definitely a bit of like more give and take. But I think it's nice because like I find with a lot of records, I'll kind of like get really inspired and I'll get it to a certain level, and then I'll sort of like just trying to figure out what a song like needs to like really finish it to like its ultimate potential is hard sometimes. And like if you're working with other people, it can really like help you blow past those like creative blocks because there's more people suggesting things. You can kind of discuss it with somebody. It's not just like it's not so internal.
Gotcha. Now, something I love to find out about songs is how many different versions there are from when you start working on it. All the tweaking that goes on to when you finally master it and put it out. Do you remember what the final V was of Push the Tempo?
Oh man, I don't actually. I find that like a sweet spot for me is like version 10. So a lot of my tracks kind of get to version 10, but um it wasn't too crazy with that song. I think we kind of figured out what we wanted it to be quite quickly. The first version like didn't have a drop, so that was like it was kind of like it just sort of stayed on one note on the drop. But I kind of knew that I didn't want that to be the case, sort of thing. We had like the kind of build up chords and stuff, and all Katy's great vocals and stuff. And then I sort of really like redid all the bass and the drop and things like that, and added a bass line. And that's when it really came together. But that one was kind of came together quite quickly. I always like tracks that come together quickly, but I never know whether it's just because it's like you have a kind of like cleaner relationship with the song personally, because it's like if you've been slaving over something for ages, you kind of lose. You don't even know if you even really like it ultimately after a while. Whereas if something's quick, you're like, that was quite a pleasurable experience. I think I like this.
I completely agree, but it's so annoying that usually the songs that you don't put a lot into or that you don't expect to do something are usually the ones that do the most.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to clarify, I don't mean like, not working on it too much, but it's like it's sometimes if something comes together neatly, you're like, that was meant to be kind of thing. But yeah, you never really know what songs are going to resonate. It's hard to tell. Like sometimes some things really cut through and sometimes they don't. And you have to be a bit brave, I guess, as a musician and just sort of like trust your instincts of what you think is good, and and try and like do different things that people you have to kind of lead the I think Rick Rubin was saying this, like the artist has to decide what you think is good. You can't kind of do it the other way around and sort of try and it's a mistake to kind of look at metrics too much and be like, I think the crowd would like to hear this. It's more about you. The sort of artist has to drive the process.
Well, congratulations on Push the Tempo, going #1. It is such an amazing song. What's next in 2025 for Subfocus?
Well, the big thing I've been concentrating on doing next is I've got a huge show in London at Ali Pali with my show Circular Sound, and I've just been like working on the setup today for it, and it's looking pretty crazy. Check it out.
Oh my God.
So
I don't even know what I'm looking at right now.
Bit of a spaceship in here today.
Is there ever a time that you get in on stage in front of a setup and you're like, oh my God, what am I in front of right now?
Yeah, like the label makers are your friend.
Subfocus, thank you so much for your time with us on America's Dance 30.
Thank you so much for having me.